Hi, thanks for being with me today. I hope you're keeping all right. Let me pose you a question. Is it possible that Jesus might have been physically disabled? Now, bear with me on this. I'm not saying he definitely was, and I'm not saying he definitely wasn't, but it is a question that I've thought about on a number of occasions, and I just want to chat with you about it today, really, and to hear your views on it as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by just sharing with you why I'm asking the question in the first place, and then secondly to raise with you a couple of theological issues that surround this idea, and then thirdly to think about why it's important. Why does it actually matter? So why am I asking this question in the first place? Well, fundamentally, it's because of a verse in the Bible that I just really don't understand. It comes in Luke chapter 4. If you remember the chapter, at the beginning of the chapter, Jesus has gone back to his hometown, and he has unrolled the scroll in the synagogue, and he's talked about this reading from Isaiah, and he's used it as a kind of prophecy for the ministry that he is going to have. And then he goes outside and all the people are absolutely amazed. It says they're amazed. And then Jesus says to them in verse 23, "Surely you will quote this proverb to me, 'Doctor, heal yourself.'" Why would he say that? Why would he expect them to quote a proverb that says, "Doctor, heal yourself"? I can only think that it would make sense for him to say that if he had a disability, if he had a visible disability, and the crowd would go, well, it's all right for him to begin a healing ministry, why doesn't he heal himself? And also the fact that this was his hometown, it was where he'd grown up, and it said that the crowd was amazed at him. And in verse 22, the crowd asked themselves, isn't this Joseph's son? Well, they would have known Jesus from childhood. They would have watched him grow up, and perhaps they were amazed because he had a disability. And here he was now coming back to the hometown and proclaiming a ministry in which he would heal others. So what do you think about that idea? Is it a possibility? Now, the two issues that this idea might raise for us theologically are the idea of perfection and limitation. So let me explain what I mean. Firstly, we believe that Jesus was perfect, don't we? As Christians, that's a really key idea for us. But what does it mean for Jesus to be perfect? Well, it's a theological idea. And in the scriptures, the idea is that Jesus was perfect in that he was completely sinless. It doesn't say anything about his physical, the physical condition of his body. The idea of his perfection is the idea that he was completely sinless. But what we do know theologically about Jesus is that he was perfect within the context of limitation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Jesus was fully divine and fully human, but his divinity, the godliness of him, the godness of him, was limited by his physicality as a human being here on earth. So for example, in Hebrews chapter 2 verse 9, it says Jesus was made lower than the angels for a little while. So in that sort of sense of spiritual hierarchy, he was limited below that of the angels. In Philippians chapter 2 verse 7, it says Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. So even though he remained fully divine, his divinity became limited by his humanity. And then in Mark chapter 13 verse 32, when Jesus is asked about the sort of end times, and he's asked about when the Son of Man is going to return and all that, in Mark 13:32, Jesus says this, "About that day or hour, no one knows, not even the Son, but only the Father. So he was making clear that in his humanity, his knowledge was limited as well. So Jesus, we hold on to the fact, was fully perfect, but his perfection was in the context of limitation. His humanity limited how he was able to express that. So where does that leave us? Well, where that leaves us is this, that the idea of perfection does not mean no limitations. Jesus could have been completely perfect and still be physically limited. So the idea of a disability that limited his physical abilities would not have impinged on his perfection. In fact, we could argue that the exact opposite was true, that it is through his limitations that Jesus became perfect. That's exactly what we read in Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 10 says Jesus was made perfect through what he suffered. And in Hebrews chapter 5 verse 8 it says Jesus learned obedience from what he suffered. So Jesus became perfect as a human being and as the divine saviour. He became perfect. He was perfected through his sufferings, i.e. through the limitations that he experienced here on earth during his own life, and then of course during the crucifixion as well. And it is how Jesus coped with his limitations, and it's what he learned through his limitations, his suffering, that perfected him. That is from the letter to the Hebrews. So Jesus was made perfect then through how he responded to his sufferings, how he dealt with his limitations. So all of that to say, Jesus could have been disabled and still been perfect, which would have made sense of that verse in Luke 4, doubtless you will quote this proverb at me, "Doctor, heal yourself." Now, why is this important? Why does this even matter? Well, I think it's because we, as a society, tend to view disability as an imperfection, as if something is wrong. It's a kind of cultural understanding, isn't it, that we look at people with disabilities, or we consider people with disabilities, and we see them as imperfect. We see that there is something wrong with them because their body is not working how we think it should. But what if we were to start thinking of disability as a limitation rather than an imperfection? What if, like Jesus, in the life of Jesus, we were to see limitation as the pathway to perfection? And so for people who are disabled, their disability, their limitation, becomes the pathway for their perfection. And if we believed that, if we began to see things like that, then we would come to the point of recognizing that disability could be a gift from God. I'm not saying God causes all people to be disabled, but God could use somebody's disability as a way of leading them towards perfection, by giving them the opportunity to respond to their disability in such a way, and to live with their disability in such a way that that became their pathway to perfection. Now, if that is true, then we would no longer stigmatize people who are disabled. We would no longer stigmatize those who live with disability as being somehow imperfect, but we would recognize that it is only a limitation instead. So how someone who is disabled responded to their disability, and perhaps how the family of someone who is disabled respond to that disability, may be a route for them to become perfected in faith. Now, as I say, I'm not underestimating the difficulties and the impact of disability on anyone's life. But maybe disability is something to be celebrated rather than to be stigmatized. And if disability is the path to the perfection of that individual, then maybe those who have disabilities can actually become the teachers in the faith of those of us who do not suffer from disability. Perhaps they are the people who have the wisdom and the experience to teach the rest of us how to become perfected in the faith. So, was Jesus disabled? Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. I really don't know. But he could have been disabled and still remained perfect, because it would have just been a limitation for him rather than an imperfection. But what's important is that idea, that view, would help us to change our theology of disability, from seeing it as imperfection to limitation. And if we did that, then perhaps we could learn to celebrate the diversity that disability brings in the world, and we could celebrate those who have disabilities, celebrate them as being the teachers of the faith for us. So yeah, what do you think as an idea? And do you have any experience of this, either yourself or someone that you may know? If you are disabled in any way, then I hope you would find this idea encouraging and perhaps even liberating, the idea that Jesus may have been disabled and that it is not a sign of imperfection but is a limitation only. I hope that you would find that a liberating concept. But anyway, yeah, let me know what you think, everyone, and drop it in the comments below, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you for taking the time to be with me today. I know that you are extremely busy, and I always appreciate it when you take the time to be here. So I hope you found that helpful, and yeah, I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care. Bye.